Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Eleanor Hawkins, and welcome to Telestory Time. Do you know that April is National Poetry Month? And I have a special poem to read to you this morning. Keep a poem in your pocket and a picture in your head, and you'll never feel lonely at night when you're in bed. The little poem will sing to you, the little picture bring to you a dozen dreams to dance to you at night when you're in bed. So keep a picture in your pocket and a poem in your head, and you'll never feel lonely at night when you're in bed. Yes, that is the poem. Keep a poem in your pocket. And now, boys and girls, the very first story that I've chosen to read to you this morning is entitled "The Children That Lived in a Shoe." There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. But they all were so handsome and clever, I'm told, that she wouldn't trade one for diamonds or gold. Now there were middle-sized children, and short ones and tall, and babies with tummies as round as a ball. They had blue eyes and brown eyes and pigtails and curls, and the boys were all jolly, and so were the girls. They each had a dog, or a bird, or a cat, a goat or a bunny, or something like that. They each had a drum, or a fiddle-dee-dee, and a little striped suit for a swim in the sea. They each had a wagon, a doll, or a kite, so no one was lonely from morning till night. They each knew a story, a song or a rhyme, a joke or riddle for passing the time. They each could do handsprings and flip-flops and reels and turn a fine somersault head over heels. They each knew a game that was jolly to play, so they always were merry and happy and gay. The shoe house they lived in, both outside and in, was clean as a whistle and neat as a pin. From the heel to the toe, it was scoured and scrubbed and painted and polished and dusted and rubbed. Willie and Tilly and Bennett and Bun washed all the windows to let in the sun. Nancy and Lulabelle dusted the rooms and swept the floors clean with their own little brooms. Patrick climbed up on the roof, it is said, and painted the chimney a beautiful red. Sally and Sue set the table at 3 and put on the kettle for making the tea. Jack ran to the store every evening at 6 for lollipops, taffy, or peppermint sticks. Molly made cookies and jam for their bread and baked each a birthday cake high as his head. Anne made the puppies bonnets and shoes and read them a story out of the news. Mickey made hats for the ponies and goats and fed them a sugar lump after their oats. Betty knit sweaters and socks for the kittens and ironed their hankies and mended their mittens. With children so clever, the old woman cried, "Well, I've time for my housework and plenty besides." So she made them red parasols, raincoats and boots, and caps with a tassel and snowballing suits. She packed them a picnic whenever they asked it, with ham and bananas and pop in a basket. She made them all pocketbooks, just the right size, with a penny in each for a special surprise. Now, it's jolly as jolly to live in a shoe. The children all cried, and the old woman too. And that, boys and girls, is the story, The Children That Lived in a Shoe. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a moment to read from our big Do You Know book. Stay tuned. And now, boys and girls, I'm going to read from our big Do You Know book. Do you know all about National Poetry Month? Do you know National Poetry Month is a month-long national celebration of poetry in the month of April, established by the Academy of American Poets in 1996. Do you know that poetry is writing, usually with rhythm that repeats, like our nursery rhymes? Do you know during National Poetry Month, we are introduced to the pleasures of reading poetry? Do you know during April, poets and poetry are brought to the attention of the public with many special ways and programs? Do you know a goal of National Poetry Month is to increase attention paid to poetry by the national and local medias? Do you know another goal of National Poetry Month is to make poetry more important part of school curriculum? Do you know that William Shakespeare wrote wonderful plays, and many of them are included in poetry, like As You Like It, All the World's a Stage, and All Men and Women Merely Players? Do you know April the 24th is Poem in Your Pocket Day, when thousands of people across the United States will carry a poem in their pocket, celebrating National Poetry Month? Boys and girls, be sure and visit your library, any of the libraries in the Craven, Pamlico, Carteret Regional Library System, and check out some very good books of poetry on your very own library card. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back with another story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, get very comfortable and ready to listen to the story, The Gingerbread Man. A rather long time ago, there lived a little old man and a little old woman in a tiny house in the green country. Their cottage was small, at the edge of a lovely woods where the air was sweet with the song of birds. Indeed, theirs was a happy life. The old man was a good carpenter. He kept himself busy by repairing the little cottage. And the old woman was a good cook. She made bread and cookies for the little old man. And then she put him, turn 2 pages. My pages are really sticking together, boys and girls. One day, as the little old woman was rolling out gingerbread for cookies, she decided to make the gingerbread into the shape of a little man. So she fashioned a sturdy little body from the sweet, dark gingerbread. On his jacket, she put 3 plump raisins for buttons. She gave him almond nuts for eyes and a red candy mouth. Then she put him in the oven to bake. Now, while he baked, she thought of him, and the little old lady loved her gingerbread man with all her heart. Perhaps it was her love for him that made a strange and wonderful thing happen. For when he was finished baking, she opened the oven, and out popped the little cookie man. He jumped to the floor and began to run away. The little old lady threw up her hands and ran after him. She called to her husband, who was mending the flower box. He dropped his hammer, and they both ran after the gingerbread man. But they could not catch him. Soon the gingerbread man came to a barn full of threshers, beating the grain from the wheat. He called to them as he ran by, "I'm a little gingerbread man. Out of the oven I jumped and ran away from a little old woman and man, and I can run from you, I can." Then the whole barnful of threshers, with hay sticking from their shirts, began to run from him behind the little old woman and the little old man, but they could not catch him. The plump little gingerbread legs ran on and on until they came to a field full of mowers. They were cutting the field. He called out to them, "I am a little gingerbread man. Out of the oven I jumped and ran away from a little old man and a little old woman. I can run from the threshers in the barn, and I can from you, I can." And then the mowers joined the parade of people running after the gingerbread man, but they could not catch him. He ran on and on past fields and houses until he came to a cow. He called out to her, "I am a little gingerbread man. Out of the oven I jumped and ran away from a little old woman and man. I ran from the threshers in the barn and the mowers working on the farm, and I can run away from you, I can." The cow started to chase him, but she was too big and he was too quick and nimble, and the cow could not catch him either. Soon the whole barnyard of animals was chasing him, the plump pink pigs, the white woolly lambs, and the chattering chickens. But none of them could catch that gingerbread man. He ran and ran until he came to a fox and called out to him, "I am a little gingerbread man. I ran from a little old woman and man. I ran from threshers in the barn and mowers working on the farm, from a cow that followed chase, a barnyard that joined the race, and I can run from you, I can." Then the fox began to chase the gingerbread man. Now foxes can run fast as the wind, so it was not very long before the fox got up with the gingerbread man and snip, snap, swallowed him up. And that was the end of the little runaway gingerbread man. But don't you wonder what would have happened if he had never tried to run away at all? Boys and girls, that is the story, the gingerbread man. And now stay tuned, and we'll be back with another story in just a moment. Stay tuned. Boys and girls, you know, when we're growing up and very little, nursery rhymes are the very first poetry we hear. And now I'm going to read you some. Ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross to see a fine lady upon a white horse, rings on her fingers and bells on her toes, and she shall have music wherever she goes. To market, to buy a fat pig, home again, jiggity jig. To market, to buy a fat hog, home again, jiggity jog. This little pig went to market. This little piggy stayed home. This little pig had roast beef. This little pig had none. And this little pig cried, wee, 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 all the way home. 1, 2, buckle my shoe. 3, 4, shut the door. 5, 6, pick up sticks. 7, 8, lay them straight. 9, 10, a big fat hen. Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been? I've been to London to look at the Queen. Pussycat, pussycat, what did you there? I frightened a little mouse under her chair. I love a little pussy, her coat is so warm, and if I don't hurt her, she'll do me no harm. So I'll not pull her tail, nor drive her away, but Pussy and I very gently will play. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1, the mouse ran down. Hickory dickory dock. Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. There came a big spider, who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Pat a cake, baker's man, bake me a cake as fast as you can. Pat it and prick it and mark it with B, and put it in the oven for baby and me. Wee Willie Winkie runs through the town, upstairs and downstairs in his nightgown, rapping at the window, crying through the lock, are the children all in bed? For now it's 8 o'clock. And that is this book of nursery rhymes. And now, boys and girls, I want to read you that old story of Jack Sprat. Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. And so between the two of them, they licked the platter clean. Jack Sprat was tall and lanky, his legs were rather thin. When his suspenders broke in two, he used a safety pin. His wife was like a dumpling and bouncy as a ball. She danced around the kitchen and curtsied in the hall. Jack brought his wife a kitten and a frisky little pup who liked to chew the curtains and tear the carpets up. He bought himself a parrot. When the bird got older, it liked to talk out loudly, sitting on Jack's shoulder. But when he bought a billy goat and piggy and a mouse, his wife said, now we ought to have some children in the house. You're right, my dear, said Mr. Sprat. We've lived too long alone. So off they went to find a child that they could call their own. When they found a freckled lad who didn't have a mother, they brought him home, and with him came his little baby brother. Soon a girl with pigtails had joined the family. She loved to feed the baby and bounce him on her knee. Children kept on coming, more girls and then more boys. Jack sometimes had to hold his ears to shut out all the noise. Mrs. Sprat baked gingerbread and whistled happy tunes, while children stirred the frosting and licked the cooking spoons. Jack called the roll every morning. No child was ever missed. They raised their hands up high until Jack checked them off the list. And when they started off to school, all washed and cleaned and neat, they made a long procession marching down the street. The tallest ones were first in line. The smallest ones came last. The policeman stopped the traffic until the children passed. At night, the boys played leapfrog and hopped about with laughter until they shook the window panes and cracked the ceiling plaster. And when the door fell off the house and let in lots of rain, Jack quickly found a piece of rope and tied it on again. The family kept on growing till the Sprats were hardly able to seat the children and themselves around the dining table. One day Jack bought a battered truck and said, "If you'll climb in, I'll sit behind the steering wheel and take you for a spin." He hitched a trailer on behind and fastened it with glue so all the animals could ride, and Polly Parrot too. They traveled here, they traveled there, and back across the nation, and bought a thimble full of gas at every filling station. They stopped to camp beside a lake and caught a speckled frog, a fuzzy caterpillar, and a tiny pollywog. The children went in wading and splashed among the rocks, but when they had to start for home, they couldn't find their socks. Their clothes were scattered everywhere. Their shoes were all mixed up. The goat looked very guilty, and so did little Pup. As they drove home, Polly Parrot said, "It's very plain to see, no children ever had more fun than Jack Sprat's family." And that is the end of Jack Sprat. And now, boys and girls, I have time to read from one of my very favorite poet authors. Yes, it's Robert Louis Stevenson. And boys and girls, I want to read you this poem that's very dear to me. The Land of Storybooks. At evening when the lamp is lit, around the fire my parents sit. They sit at home and talk and sing, and do not play at anything. Now with my little gun I crawl, all in the dark along the wall, and fall around the forest track, away behind the sofa back. There in the night, where none can spy, all in my hunter's camp I lie, and play at books that I have read, till it is time to go to bed. These are the hills, these are the woods, these are my starry solitudes, and there the river by whose brink the roaring lions come to drink. I see the others far away, as if in firelit camp they lay, and I'd like an Indian scout around their party proud about. So when my nurse comes in for me, home I return across the sea, and go to bed with backward looks at my dear, dear land of storybooks. And then another poem that I like so well, and I know many of you do, is entitled The Swing. How do you like to go up in a swing, up in the air so blue? Oh, I do think it is the pleasantest thing ever a child can do. Up in the air and over the wall, till I can see so wide, rivers and trees and cattle and all, over the countryside, till I look down on the garden green, down on the roof so brown. Up in the air I go flying again, up in the air and down. And then his smallest poem of all, of Robert Louis Stevenson, is Happy Thought. The world is so full of a number of things, I'm sure we should all be as happy as kings. And the poems I've read this morning are from A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. He has the most wonderful children's poetry, and my husband collects this book and has many different editions. Boys and girls, let me remind you, be sure and have your parents read to you some of the poetry that I've read to you this morning. You know, the stories I read have a lot of rhythm and rhyme, and they are part of our National Poetry Week. And boys and girls, be sure and enjoy listening to the nursery rhymes. Even as an adult, they're beautiful. And have your parents read poetry, and all the way through school, you will learn to enjoy Shakespeare when you're finally in high school. So now I see it's time for us to close our book of stories for this morning. But until next week, this is Eleanor Hawkins saying bye-bye for Telestory Time.